Welcome to our continuing series on the new music, Part 8. We continue today the excellent article by Rich Heffern, Spirit in Sound, New Sacred Music. Taverner and Pert experienced a spiritual awakening through the Greek and Russian Orthodox churches, with Taverner visiting the monks of Mount Athos for theological and aesthetic instruction. Górecki found renewal in the Catholic Church in Poland. Rautavaara incorporates both Lutheran and Orthodox influences, together with the folk art, poetry, and natural beauty of his native Finland. Their spiritual and theological journeys have led them to create new sacred sounds that can be heard both in concert halls and at home. Conductors speak of choral performers coming to them and expressing in different ways that it's a great honor to be able to sing this music. In search of a new sacred sound, these composers have turned to pre-Enlightenment musical forms, going all the way back to the very beginnings of music in Gregorian and Byzantine plain chant, medieval polyphony, and the sacred music of non-European lands. This music, quote, though inspired by ancient sounds, has a captivating freshness that strikes a resonant chord in audiences weary of the harsh dissonance of much contemporary classical music, end quote, wrote musicologist Martha Ainsworth. Quote, they breathe new life into a beleaguered art form. As for Ezekiel, God breathed life into dry bones, end quote. Somber shades. Public attention to this turn toward the spiritual began with Henryk Górecki. His third symphony, known as the Sorrowful Songs Symphony, scored for soprano and orchestra, had a long run at the top of the music charts in the United States and Britain in the mid-1990s. The 69-year-old composer claims he was nourished by the folk music of his home region, the city of Katowice, near the Tatra Mountains of Poland. Katowice sits not far from the town of Auschwitz, which the Germans called Auschwitz. Much of Górecki's popular Third Symphony is tinted with somber shades, sorrowful and slow. It relentlessly builds to several shattering climaxes. The sense of religious awe in both the music's gentle hush and its heart-rending cruxes is palpable and powerfully moving. The text for the first movement is a 15th century Polish monastic prayer known as the Lamentation of the Holy Cross, in which Jesus' mother begs her dying son to speak to her from the cross. The second movement's text is a prayer found scratched on a Gestapo prison wall in 1944 by Polish teenager Helen Wanda, and I don't know this pronunciation, Blazushakovna. Mother, no, do not cry. Most chaste Queen of Heaven, help me always. Hail Mary. The music that accompanies the doomed girl's prayer is gently lyrical, making the sung prayer even more poignant and heart-piercing. This symphony is not dramatically operatic, but rather deeply human. Written in 1976, it was used on the soundtrack in a 1987 French film. The music eclipsed the forgotten film as it caught the ear of a whole new generation of listeners. In the 1960s, Gorecki was among the small group of the most avant-garde composers of the time, writing the kind of dry academic music that got funding from foundations. He studied for a time with the influential Catholic composer and organist Olivier Messiaen in Paris. In the 1970s, Gorecki turned from modernism to study medieval church music, combining in his compositions early techniques of sacred music with his fascination with the sounds a large modern orchestra can make. Gorecki is a devout Catholic and supporter of Pope John Paul II. He opposed Poland's former communist rulers. Gorecki claims he experienced a spiritual reawakening through the Polish Catholic Church. One of his major works, Beatus Vir, is dedicated to the Pope, who was present at its premiere performance. With its glow of calm harmonies and clustered sonorities, his music taps elemental musical forces, said musicologist Maria Harley. Gorecki reaches into archetypes. His music has a relevance to the mood of today, its anxieties, sorrows, and hopes. Gorecki himself doesn't give interviews, though he once quoted the Pope to the press. Quote, "Artists know that what they do is only a distant echo of God's word." Bright sadness. Arvo Pärt was born in 1935 in Estonia, a country with cultural conditions rooted in an ancestrally religious past, while being part of a secular state as a Soviet republic. Pärt began his career by composing symphonies in the Western tradition, music influenced strongly by Soviet composer Dmitri Shostakovich. He experimented with musical trends like serialism, then for a time wrote music patterned after Bach, finally finding his true identity after investigating Russian Orthodox Church music, medieval music, and the mathematical polyphony of Renaissance composers such as Akegum and Machaut. Thereafter, Pärt began to compose music that is, in musicologist Wilfred Miller's phrase, quote, extraordinarily simple and simply extraordinary. His most popular works, Fratre, Cantus in Memory of Benjamin Britten, Festina Lente, Tabula Rasa, are austere, mysterious, and hauntingly beautiful, evoking figures that deepen with each careful listen. The vocal pieces are overtly ecclesiastical. The instrumental works, quote, seek the eternal silence at the heart of sound, end quote, according to Mellers. Pärt pioneered a musical technique called tintinnabulation, from the Latin word for little bells, in which a single triad, the most basic chord, predominates in one or more voices. In a four-voice context, it is likely that two of the voices will sound only notes of a single triad, while the other two voices move in a stepwise fashion. This triad is the tonal center of a musical piece. The effect of this spare use of notes is to evoke the pealing of bells, with the bells' complex but richly sonorous mass of overtones and swells, a sound that is simultaneously static and in flux. The overtones are called God's music because they come from the physics of sound itself. The complex and many-faceted only confuse me, wrote Pärt, describing his musical idiom. And I must search for unity. What is it, this one thing, and how do I find my way to it? Traces of this perfect thing appear in many guises, and everything that is unimportant falls away. One critic characterized Pärt's music as permeated with a, quote, bright sadness. Another said that his best works remind of the passionate tranquility of a Russian icon. Quote, Pärt's music issues from the spirit of Lent, end quote, wrote Hermann Konnen. It comes to us unaffected by the plethora of styles, techniques, and values offered in luxurious array by the music industry. His music enfolds the manifest sufferings of mankind in the declining years of the last century, which through great upheavals have been reduced to an inhuman common denominator. Typical of these new, quote, spiritual composers, Pärt rejected values associated with contemporary classical music. His style has been called holy minimalism. Quote, this minimalist style is to music what contemplative practices are to prayer, said Martha Ainsworth. Contemplative practice involves listening in receptive silence, using a mantra or a scriptural phrase as a tool to keep one coming back to a center. In traditional classical music, themes and ideas are developed and moved forward to a conclusion. Pert's music is more like contemplative prayer, said Ainsworth. It is meditative, repetitive, filled with silences, using simple combinations of notes. The effect is a feeling of being suspended in time. Pert limits his tonal and rhythmic materials to the bare minimum. When the musicians who first premiered his most famous work first saw the score of Tabula Rasa in 1976, they cried out, "Where's the music?" Pert employs techniques such as slow tempi, use of silence, long rhythmic values, textural contrasts, stepwise melodic motion, and repetitive patterns, out of which comes music that is at once austere and sensuous, without any extravagant use of the orchestra. Brian Morton and Pamela Collins, editors of Contemporary Composers, write that Pert's music, quote, seems to be hardly of our time. Yet there can be little doubt that the revelation of his music has been one of the most important factors in the development of a new sensibility in recent music, end quote. Sacred music is thus reborn in the religious sensibility of a man from a small country, until recently under the thumb of an anti-religious superpower, well off the beaten path of world culture. Conductor Paul Hillier, who has worked with the composer, told NCR, quote, Pert uses the simplest of means, a simple note, a triad, words, and then with them creates an intense, vibrant music that stands apart from the world and beckons us to an inner quietness and an inner exaltation.